Samantha's mother-in-law had just finished digging in the vegetable garden when she came into the house for a drink of water. Her son-in-law, Josh, was still lying on the bed in the heat, barely moving as the day wore on. He muttered something to her and forced himself to get up. Samantha's mother-in-law never saw him as a helper. She didn't ask this selfish man to follow her around the garden, pulling weeds, weeding, or watering the vegetables. She did all the work herself, her hands calloused from years of tilling and planting, and she knew Josh wouldn't lift a finger to help. But in the fall and winter, she wouldn't let him touch the canning and demanded money for it because Josh never helped. So in the fall and winter, Samantha's business flourished. She was proud of the rows of canned vegetables, each jar representing her hard work. Josh loved to eat, and every month he unlocked the door and looked directly at the vegetable garden, watching Samantha work. He often thought about the fresh vegetables that came into the kitchen, the ripe tomatoes and crisp cucumbers. Samantha was just crossing to the other side of the garden, to the tomatoes and greenhouse, and beads of sweat appeared on her forehead. Josh plucked up the courage to follow her, but Samantha didn't notice him right away. She was hard at work watering, concentrating solely on tending the plants. Samantha went into the greenhouse, bent down to the ground, and began picking green cucumbers, as her grandmothers used to do. At this time, she thought of Josh. He loved small cucumbers, not to slice them, but to eat them at once, savoring the crisp freshness. She smiled, remembering the times she'd watched him devour them without a care in the world. Suddenly, Josh came up behind her and began to put his arm around Samantha to keep her from falling. She didn't say anything to Josh. Although she thought of her husband, she had no one else. Loneliness was creeping up on her, and although she hadn't expected it, her son-in-law's presence made her feel warm. That was why Samantha didn't chase Josh away, but decided to see what happened next. And what happened next was something Samantha could never have imagined. She only had time to sigh because Josh was unstoppable. He was gentle, yet insistent, his hands holding her waist tightly. It seemed to her that Josh, who had never helped before, was now good enough, and she could get what she wanted. There was something primal about this moment, the warmth of the greenhouse surrounding them, and the earthy smell of the soil mingling with their sweat. After helping her son-in-law so much, Samantha hugged him and, smiling, told him that if he continued to help her like this, he would get sunbathing privileges for free. She laughed, trying to take the incident lightly, but deep down she felt something she hadn't felt in years. Later, as she prepared the meal, she beckoned Josh to join her in the kitchen. When he entered the kitchen, Samantha felt like she had been electrocuted. Her whole body seemed to come alive when he was there. She had a feeling for him that she couldn't define, but it was undeniable. How had this happened? She had never felt this way about him before. The sun must have made her dizzy, Samantha thought, but when Josh came over and kissed her, she couldn't deny it anymore. At that moment, Samantha pressed herself against him, and his arms involuntarily wrapped around her. It was unforgettable, and right there in the kitchen, an abyss of heat came over them that almost made the plates on the table start bouncing. Needless to say, at that moment these two were very heated. The smell of food, the clinking of dishes created memories that neither of them would be able to forget. After catching their breath, they sat down at the table. Josh poured a shot glass and made a toast. He raised the shot glass, his eyes met hers, and a tangible connection was made between them. Samantha was very happy with how her relationship with her son-in-law was developing, and they sat and talked and drank, sharing about each other. They talked about their lives, dreams, and fears, things they had never talked about before. It was as if a wall had been broken down between them, and for the first time, they saw each other not just as family, but as individuals. And when it was time for bed, they went to the room where their bond continued to grow stronger. The night was filled with whispers and confessions, touches that conveyed what words couldn't. From that night on, their relationship became different, deeper, more meaningful. They no longer tiptoed behind each other, but embraced what they found in each other. In the days that followed, Samantha and Josh found moments to be together in the garden, in the kitchen, or even in the quiet evening hours when the rest of the family was asleep. Samantha looked forward to those moments, her heart pounding in anticipation. She had never imagined that her son-in-law, whom she had once considered lazy and selfish, would become such an important person to her. Josh began to change, too. He started to help out more, not only in the garden, but around the house as well, doing things that brought a smile to Samantha's face. He was drawn to her, not only by her beauty, but also by her strength and resilience. One particularly hot afternoon, Samantha suggested they relax and sunbathe. They spread towels in the garden, and while they basked in the sun, Josh reached out and took her hand. It was such a simple gesture, but it spoke volumes. Samantha turned her head in his direction. Her eyes met his, and in that moment, she realized that she had made the right choice in letting him into her life. They spent the rest of the day laughing and talking, sharing stories from their past and dreaming of the future. The garden that had once been a place of labor became their sanctuary, a place where they could be themselves without fear or judgment. And so, as the days turned into weeks, Samantha and Josh's bond continued to grow. They were no longer just mother-in-law and son-in-law. They were partners, confidants, and friends. Their relationship was unconventional, but it worked, and that was what mattered. Samantha no longer felt alone. She had Josh, and together they dealt with whatever challenges came their way. Their friendship, born in an unexpected moment in the greenhouse, blossomed, and they knew that as long as they had each other, they could handle anything life threw their way.